Should I buy a clone or a real piece of equipment? Now, here's the thing here. I got this question through because I started talking to a few people online, and basically I'm going to be getting an original Fairchild to compare with the unfairchild and then compare with a Herchild. Now, this question kind of came up where, well, which one would you prefer? So, like, the question here is, what would like the differences between and the benefits of having the real piece of equipment is that when you look at a clone. Now, when a client comes and looks at your studio, for instance, if I had clones of every piece of equipment here, it would be far less impressive than if I had the real thing. The real thing speaks volumes. And that's what people come to you for. If they're coming to you for, let's say, the PQ that's here. If I had a 5-band clone of that, no one would care about what it is. And really, when it comes to selling a service, the pieces of equipment, like things like a Shadow Hills compressor, that sells. That sells a mastering chain. The Unfairchild is basically a Fairchild. The Alpha compressor, all these compressors, the Buzz, the Black Box HG2, everybody knows this one, and they see it and they go, oh yeah, I'd love my song to run through that. But if you had clones of everything, I don't think anybody goes, oh yeah, I'd love to run it through that clone. Now, the one piece that is technically a clone, but I don't class it as a clone, is our Unfairchild. Now, the Unfairchild is a direct clone of the original Fairchild. But the good thing about the one thing with the Unfairchild is they're pretty much identical in terms of how they sound. But the one thing with the Unfairchild is it's brought into the modern day. So you've got a lot of added features. You've got a wet dry mix, you've got control of the attack and release, you've got the feedback feed forward, you've got I think it's a DC offset that you'd have to go inside with a screwdriver on the original, is now on the front with controls, wet dry mix, feedback feed forward, what else is on there, sidechain, frequency filter. So you've got all these added benefits to the updated kind of more, let's call it the more modern version. But it still looks exactly the same. So, and people know of it as the kind of, let's call it the modern, upgraded, better version of the original Fairchild. So when it comes to ones like that, it's slightly different. And that's one thing you do get with some clones, is that they have additional features. A wet dry mix is common. Like, for instance, on the original G-Bus compressor, I mean, there is thousands of G-Bus compressor clones, and 99% of them, they don't sound great. I had one, and I remember buying this clone, and I was like, yeah, this is a G-Bus compressor clone. I don't need to buy a G-Bus compressor. It was only when I compared them and compared an original G-Bus comp, when I got the G-Bus comp, compared it to the original, to this clone, and I went, oh, that's just a compressor. That's not a G-Bus. It's G-Bus compressor style, but it's not a clone. It's not an original, it don't sound like it kind of thing. But it did have a wet dry mix on it, which was really good. And I had the X-Rack version of the G-Bus comp, and that didn't. So the wet dry mix was really good to have on it. So there are things that a clone has that the original doesn't. A prime example of, for instance, the Herchild compared to the original Fairchild, for instance, is the tubes that are in the Herchild cost £200 to replace. The tubes that are in the Fairchild, you're probably talking about 2, 3, 4, 5 grand to replace. So there's a big difference there. And look, if money is no object, always buy the original, because it's going to hold value more. It's going to attract clients. It's going to sound like the original thing. Now, often clones, they claim to sound like the real thing, but often they don't. And you know, you don't. There's a lot of clones out there. 1176s are cloned non-stop. I had a Hairball Audio clone, and it claimed to be identical, or close as possible, and it looked great from the front. Was it identical? I didn't really think so, but look, it did the 1176 style compression. For instance, clones. Here's a great example on a clone. Clark Technique, Pultec style EQ, absolute trash. You know, I've used one, I've tried it, I've looked at it, and it's like, oh, it sounds terrible. It's not a nice EQ. The original Pultec, incredible, sounds great. One's £200, one's I think like £8,000. You know, of course they're going to be hugely different. But here's the thing with clones is £200, £8,000. It's clones are a lot cheaper because like you will pay a certain premium for the brand. You will pay that, but then that's what you get back from clients wanting to work with you and wanting to work on these pieces of equipment. You know, like microphones, a U87 or a U87 clone. You know, if a professional artist walks into your studio and you've got a U87, you know, they go instantly go, yeah, I know a U87 standard, brilliant, get on that. Then you see that it's a U87 clone, you go, oh God, how much are we paying for this studio time? These things, you know, it does play a part. And I think it's very natural for the client to think like that. Because, you know, one, like I said, with a Pultec style EQ, Clark Technique, £200, £8,000 for a Pultec, the original, for instance. I don't know if they're that much these days. They might even be more, to be honest. But yeah, you've got a big difference in price there. And when look, if you've got two options to buy two things, a clone at £1,000 or the real thing at £5,000-6,000, if you're kind of a hobbyist, clones are brilliant. Clones, if you don't need to attract clients with pictures of the real pieces of equipment, clones are brilliant. And look, if they're able to get as close as possible to the original sound, then that's great. But for me, from my perspective as a professional business, I couldn't have clones, because it's a clone. It's kind of not, but it's kind of like a fake, and it kind of is. It's a clone of it. It's, you know, it is technically, it is a fake. So that's what I'm trying to say there. With, like, I couldn't have them because I would be putting fake equipment in, and that's, you know, that's regardless of how the two sound. One, they could sound nigh on identical. They could really sound. It could be the most amazing clone, but yeah, I don't think any client would look at the clone and go, oh yeah, look, he's got that clone. No. Yes, I mean that's my opinion on clones.